9:12 a.m. January 15th. My key jammed in the lock, it wouldn't turn. The sound was small, final. A notice fluttered on the door. Official lock change, #7421LH. At the bottom, the signature, Lucas Henderson. My son. A text appeared before I could breathe. This is not your home. Do not enter. Then a voicemail from his wife, calm and practiced. Mary, we've already filed the no-entry order. Please don't make a scene. Snow drifted across the welcome mat, the same one I bought 20 years ago that simply said home. Now the house stood locked, and I was on the wrong side of its walls. My hands shook, not from the cold, but from understanding. They had shut me out of the life I built. If you want to hear how it happened and what I did next, stay with me until the end. My name is Mary Henderson. I'm 61, born outside Helena, and my hands remember night shifts and winter roads. For 28 years, I worked med-surg at St. Peter's, 12-hour shifts that bled into 14 when a code ran long. I charted, double-checked allergies, and sat with strangers at 3 a.m. while the vending machines buzzed like small suns. My badge lived on a lanyard with a blue bead my husband tied there. I paid the mortgage one paycheck at a time. The loan began in 1997, 30 years, fixed, $871. $64 a month at the start, then refinanced when rates fell. When my husband, David, got winded on the walk to the mailbox, I picked up extra shifts and slid the money quietly into the house account. We improved slow. Insulation one summer, a second-hand washer the next. Every receipt went into a green binder labeled home. Lucas is my only child. He arrived on a Tuesday in March while sleet scratched the window. He preferred Legos to T-ball, lined up toy cows by size, and memorized license plates for fun. I taught him to check the propane gauge, to coil extension cords, to say thank you to the person bagging your groceries, because their hands make dinner happen. I am not sentimental. Motherhood, to me, is inventory and reflexes. Catch what falls before it breaks. Amber entered our picture 11 years ago. She had neat hair, quick compliments, and a way of opening my drawers as if she'd labeled them. She is excellent with photographs. Everyone candid, everyone slightly better. She once told me my lasagna was so comforting, and I heard the period like a lid closing. She worked part-time in marketing for a roofing company and full-time on the glossy future she pictured. They moved into my house after the basement in their rental flooded. Just for 6 weeks, Lucas said, standing in my doorway with damp boxes and apology in his eyes. 6 weeks became 24 months. I didn't make a speech, I made space. When Amber said the nursery would need sunlight, I gave them the big bedroom and folded my sweaters into the small room where my sewing machine used to sit. I told myself this is what family does: rearrange, absorb, recalibrate. I had rules, but they were simple. Put your name on leftovers. Wash the sheets on Sundays. Nobody makes big decisions about the house without the person whose name is on the loan. I taped them inside the pantry door, beside the cinnamon and baking powder. If you opened the door, you could smell nutmeg and read my hope. David's health turned on us like a hallway that ended at a locked exit. Congestive heart failure, medications with names that sounded like rivers. He hated the oxygen tubing and loved his flannel robe. The night his ankles swelled into barrels, Lucas helped me lift his legs onto pillows. We did it like professionals, wordless and precise. When David slept, I paid the electric bill online and set out 3 mugs, mine, Lucas's, Amber's, so the kitchen could say, we are together in this. But houses notice where weight settles. When Amber labeled plastic bins nursery, she stacked them where the sun fell and my chair used to live. She called my furniture dated and ordered a gray sofa on a buy now plan that arrived in a box. Lucas stopped calling me mom. Mary, are there more trash bags? Mary, can you sign this? And because tone is a kind of weather, the house cooled 1 degree at a time, never enough to complain about, enough to reach for a sweater. I know who I am in a crisis: a list maker, a caller, the woman who reads the fine print. I can untangle billing codes and speak calmly to a clerk who answers to scripts. I can hold a vein steady under a shaky needle. I kept thinking those skills would translate to family. That if I stayed steady, the room would steady too. This is who I am. The woman who carries a tape measure in her purse, writes the date on the first page of a new spiral notebook, and keeps postage stamps in a glass sugar jar because envelopes deserve kindness. My memory keeps numbers, alarm codes, lab values, and forgets slights on purpose so the air stays navigable. I believe in repair. I still do, but I have learned it must be mutual, or else you are only sanding down your own edges. This is who they are to me now, a son who discovered that convenience can pass for love if no one challenges it, and a daughter-in-law who knows how to steer a story for an audience. They are not monsters. They are simply people who chose themselves at the cost of the person who taught them how to choose it all. And I am the one who finally looked at the ledgers of effort and expense and understood that the numbers no longer balanced. When I say their names, I taste both milk and rust. I still keep a blue bead on my lanyard and fold the towels so the edges face the same way. But now, when I open the pantry, there is a blank square where the rules used to hang. I took them down the day I realized I was the only one still reading them. It was Christmas Eve when the first line appeared in the glass, so fine I almost missed it. We had the usual gathering: ham, mashed potatoes, a too-sweet cranberry sauce that Amber insisted was her tradition. The tree lights flickered against the bay window, and I remember feeling grateful, almost foolishly so, that we were still a family under one roof. David had been gone 6 months by then. His chair was empty, but I left it in place anyway. Amber sat where I used to, her lipstick matching the ornaments she'd chosen. Lucas carved the ham in his father's spot, and I stayed busy with the dishes, pretending not to notice how natural it looked for them. Families shift, I told myself that. They evolve, they stretch. Love adjusts itself to new arrangements, or that's what I believed. After dinner, Amber made a small joke. She was showing pictures of paint samples on her phone, soft grays, whites, modern neutrals, she called them. She turned the screen toward me and smiled. When we inherit this place, she said lightly, I'm repainting the living room first. I laughed the way polite women laugh when something stings but shouldn't matter. I expected Lucas to correct her, to say, Mom's house, Amber, or let's not get ahead of ourselves. He didn't. He just looked down, pressed his napkin into a tight square, and changed the subject to football scores. The conversation moved on. But inside me, something very quiet tilted out of alignment. I felt it, the kind of shift that doesn't make a sound but changes everything after it. Later that night, when the dishes were washed and they'd gone to bed, I sat alone at the kitchen table. The clock above the stove ticked softly. I stared at the tree lights blinking against the reflection in the window. There was a strange echo in the house, as though even the walls knew they were being measured for someone else's future. I brushed it off for weeks. Told myself I was oversensitive, tired. I blamed grief. It's easy, after loss, to mistake simple awkwardness for cruelty. And so, when Amber replaced my floral curtains with gauzy white ones to let in more light, I nodded and thanked her. When Lucas swapped out the oak coffee table David built for a new one from a flat box, I said nothing. It was around then they started using my first name more often. Mary, can you grab me the charger? Mary, did you move my mail? Small things, harmless on the surface. But every syllable sounded like an erasure. Mom had been retired without ceremony. I told myself they were growing up, forming their own family rhythm. I wanted to believe that. The first real argument came in March. Amber wanted to turn the guest room, my sewing space, into a nursery. It's just storage anyway, she said, tugging open the closet door. We'll move your things to the basement for now. For now. 2 words that mean never coming back. I didn't refuse. I just folded the fabric, labeled each box, and carried them downstairs myself. My back ached for days, but I didn't complain. I didn't want to be the bitter mother-in-law in their story. By summer, they had reorganized nearly every corner of the house. My old furniture was too heavy, my wall frames too busy. Amber brought in new things, white, smooth, untouched by time. I watched the transformation like someone observing a stranger move into their reflection. Lucas worked long hours, or so he said. He came home later and later, and when he did, his words had a clipped efficiency. He was polite the way a landlord is polite, transactional. I noticed that my opinions, once asked for, were now tolerated. The smallest moments began to hum with tension. A grocery list rewritten by Amber with different brands circled. My mail stacked neatly in a basket labeled miscellaneous. The thermostat mysteriously reset to their comfort instead of mine. One morning, I found a note taped to the fridge. Please text before inviting guests. We're trying to keep a routine for the baby. There was no baby yet, only the plan of one. But the rules had already begun. I tried to tell Lucas I felt pushed aside. I chose my words carefully, the way you speak to a patient in pain, steady, calm, gentle. He didn't look up from his phone. Mom, you worry too much, he said. Amber's just nesting. Nesting. I wanted to laugh. Birds don't evict the tree that shelters them. It was then I realized that the things I thought made us close, shared chores, shared meals, shared grief, had actually made me convenient. I was the scaffolding they used to climb into their own lives, and now that they'd reached the roof, they no longer needed the structure. Still, I stayed quiet. I told myself storms pass. I had seen far worse things in hospital rooms, sons shouting at fathers, sisters stealing wedding rings from drawers. My own family couldn't be that cruel. But the human heart doesn't break all at once. It cracks, dries, and flakes like old paint, one corner at a time until one day it doesn't hold the wall anymore. That Christmas night was the first flake that fell. The first soundless warning that love, unguarded, can become possession. I wish I had known then how much they had already decided. I might have saved myself a few winters of waiting for kindness to come back through a door that was already closing. The motel smelled like lemon cleaner poured over old smoke. I checked in at 2:47 p.m., paid $62 cash from the envelope behind my flower tin, and asked for a ground floor room. The clerk slid a brass key across the counter. I added it to my ring beside the one that no longer turned in my own door. Inside, the heater rattled, the curtains breathed with passing trucks. I set my suitcase on the bedspread of wilted roses and unpacked like a nurse laying out instruments. 4 shirts, 2 pairs of jeans, socks rolled tight, the scarf from Missoula, my blue mug wrapped in a sweater sleeve, and the green binder labeled home. The binder landed with a sound that made me straighten. I put the useless house key in the center of the round table by the window. Under the lamp it looked like a small mistake made shiny. My cheek was warm where Lucas's hand had connected. I touched it once, not to feel sorry, only to mark the tenderness for the record forming in my head. Outside, a plow scraped the road. Inside, I opened the binder. Tabs, mortgage, utilities, taxes, repairs. First payment, February 1st, 1997, $871. 64, every month after, checked off in my square handwriting. Refinance, 2012. Boiler repair, 2009. Insurance renewals. I brewed motel coffee and poured it into the chipped mug. Then I made a list, the way we do in a code, short, decisive, assignable. 1. Freeze automatic mortgage draft. 2. Call counsel. 3. Preserve evidence. 4. Do not explain yourself to people who enjoy updates. I drew boxes to tick. I listened to the audio I'd recorded that morning. Lucas's voice filled the room. This is not your home. Get out. The slap sounded like a book shut hard. I saved the file to 2 places and emailed it to myself with the subject, Lock Change Evidence, January 15th. I photographed the locksmith receipt, $480, stamped paid, the property access request with his blue signature, and my cheek in the mirror's bad light. I photographed the mortgage page and my check stubs. Timestamped, backed up, boring truth. At 4:12 p.m. I called Helena Credit Union. I recited the loan number, 1987 HND, and verified my identity by memory I have not lost. I am co-owner, I said. Terminate the automatic draft effective today. The representative asked for a reason. Change of household, I answered. She read back the stop date and a confirmation string I copied onto a sticky note. HCU 1542, stop. I ticked box 1. Next, I opened David's manila folder marked Supplemental Will Clauses. Clause 178 sat there like a gate we'd built and hoped never to use. If our son, Lucas Henderson, harms, coerces, or evicts Mary Henderson, he forfeits all inheritance under this instrument. Assets transfer solely to Mary Henderson. We wrote it after a hard appointment, parked in a lot filled with melting snow. Not for him, David had said. For you. I called the lawyer whose card a hospital social worker once pressed into my palm. My name is Mary Henderson, I said. I need to activate Clause 178 and seek protection for residents' rights. She listened without interrupting. We set 9:30 a.m. tomorrow. Bring identification, the binder, the audio, any texts, she said. I wrote the list on motel stationery and slid it into the sleeve with the clause. Box 2, tick. Then preservation. I uploaded scans to cloud folders with dull names, taxes _1997 _2012, mortgage _all, photos _proof. I wrote a timeline in my notebook, January 14th lock change receipt, January 15th 9:12 a.m. Notice, 10:03 a.m. Text, 10:11 a.m. Voicemail, 2:47 p.m. Check-in, 4:12 p.m. HCU call. Box 3, tick. The fourth box took more will. I deleted Lucas's contact. Not rage, maintenance. Fewer openings for harm. I muted family threads. I sent one message to myself. Silence is not surrender, it is strategy. Then I shut the phone off and slid it under the pillow like warmth cooling. Hunger knocked. I ate crackers and an apple from my bag and counted what remained in my envelope, $240. The parking lot lights flicked on and turned the snow blue. I washed my mug with motel soap that smelled like almonds and set it to dry on a towel folded twice. Care travels with you. So does dignity. I lay down without undressing, shoes on the floor, binder under my hand. The heater coughed, caught, and settled. I thought about the garden along the south wall, the bulbs sleeping under crusted earth. I thought about the welcome mat now under someone else's snow. Sleep came in short pieces. Between them, the plan crystallized, not as anger, but as geometry. I would go to the bank. I would go to the lawyer. I would carry papers that speak without trembling. I would let procedure do what raised voices never can. Near midnight, the room went quiet enough to hum. My cheek no longer burned. The key on the table gleamed. I understood that a lock is just a question, and I had the answer in writing. Morning would come. And with it, action. The line inside me, bent and bent again, had turned straight. This ends now. Thus. At 8:03 a.m. sharp, the sun hit the parking lot ice like broken glass. I folded the motel blanket, checked the room twice, and placed the useless house key inside an envelope marked evidence. I slipped it into my purse beside the binder. The air outside stung my lungs clear, thin, alive. I drove to Helena Credit Union first. The lot was nearly empty except for a blue pickup idling with its wipers on. Inside, the lobby smelled of copier toner and faint cinnamon from the staff kitchen. A teller named Ruth recognized me. She used to come through the hospital during flu season for her shots. Mary, she said softly, you okay? I need to make changes to a mortgage, I answered. My voice was even, professional, the tone of a woman who has given discharge instructions 1,000 times. We walked to her desk. I gave her the loan number, 1987 HND. She typed, frowned. You're a co-owner, yes? Yes. And you want to terminate all automatic payments connected to my account. Effective immediately. Her fingers paused above the keyboard. That will put the payment in default if no one else pays it, she said carefully. I'm aware. She printed a form. I signed my name twice, dated it, and wrote in block letters, owner request, termination of automatic draft. She handed me a carbon copy, warm from the printer. I folded it into the binder under the tab loan. As she processed the cancellation, I added, please note in the file, legal action pending under co-ownership clause. Her eyes met mine, something like respect crossing them. It's done, she said. I thanked her, returned to my car, and sat in silence while the heater rattled awake. Box 1 done, again, in reality. Next stop, the law office. It sat above a coffee shop on Last Chance Gulch. I climbed the narrow stairs carrying my binder like a shield. The secretary offered me tea, I declined. The lawyer, Ms. Dunn, was younger than I expected, hair cropped short, eyes precise. She greeted me with a handshake that meant business, not pity. I laid everything on her desk: the binder, the photographs, the audio recording on a small drive, the printouts from the bank. She listened while I recounted the last 48 hours, no theatrics, only timestamps and documents. When I finished, she nodded slowly. "You've done most of my work for me," she said. "I'm used to protocols," I replied. We reviewed the clause 178 line by line. David's foresight sat there in legal typeface: patient and absolute. Harm, coercion, or eviction nullifies inheritance rights. Ms. Dunn underlined 3 phrases, then turned to her assistant. "We'll file the activation notice today. Include the audio as supporting evidence. Certified mail to both parties and to probate." She looked back at me. "I'll also request a temporary stay on property transfer or sale. That keeps the house frozen until the court rules. They can't refinance or alter ownership." "Good," I said. "They'll try." We spent 2 hours assembling packets. Each page slid into its sleeve with a sound like small justice being restored. At 11:47, she stamped the final envelope. "You may want to prepare for fallout," she warned. "When they realize what's happened." "I'm prepared," I said. Before leaving, I asked one last question. "If they contact me, do not respond directly. Forward all communication to me. Silence can't be twisted." I thanked her and walked out lighter, though the binder now held more weight. At the post office, I mailed certified copies to Lucas and Amber. The clerk affixed bright green stickers marked "Return Receipt Requested." I watched each envelope disappear behind the counter slot, small, rectangular verdicts already in motion. Back in my car, I wrote the time in my notebook: 12:22 p.m. Clause 178 activated. Lunch was a sandwich eaten in the driver's seat, bread stiff from cold air. I stared through the windshield at the mountain ridges, the same view that used to anchor me from my kitchen window. Somewhere up there, snowmelt fed the river that ran past my old garden. Continuity, I thought, is a form of mercy. I stopped by the motel, packed my things, and checked out. "Heading home?" the clerk asked. "No," I said. "Heading forward." I rented a temporary apartment on Rodney Street, small, 1 bedroom, but with a window that caught the afternoon light. I placed the binder on the table, the mug beside it, and poured myself water that tasted faintly of metal. The room was quiet in a good way. That evening, my phone buzzed with messages: 11 missed calls from Lucas, 3 from unknown numbers, and 1 voicemail from Amber. "We need to talk. This isn't fair. You can't just..." I deleted it before the sentence ended. MS. Dunn had told me not to respond. I didn't. At 7:40 p.m, she texted, "Filed and confirmed. Inheritance clause accepted. House legally frozen pending review." I stared at the screen until the words steadied in my chest. In the quiet, I took the useless house key from its envelope and set it on the new table. For a moment, I almost pitied them, the way ignorance and greed always mistake silence for weakness. I wrote one final note in my notebook: "All steps executed. Next, wait." Then, for the first time in days, I allowed myself to rest. Justice doesn't roar, it unfolds, deliberate as paper through a printer. And tonight, for the first time since the lock turned against me, I could breathe in the proof that I still own something greater than a house. I own the truth. 31 days later, the waiting ended. It came not as drama, but as a beige envelope in my mailbox marked Helena County Property Division. Inside, a formal default notice. The mortgage, unpaid for 2 consecutive cycles, had entered escalation. The letter stated in calm print that foreclosure proceedings would begin in 15 business days if funds were not remitted by both account holders. They had kept my house, but not the payments. I called Ms. Dunn, who had already seen the filing. "We'll let the system do its work," she said. "You're covered. The clause stands." That night, she arranged a family meeting at her office. Lucas and Amber arrived first, dressed well, but pale in a way money can't hide. I arrived second, binder in hand, silent but certain. We sat across from each other, the air smelling faintly of toner and peppermint tea. Ms. Dunn began with procedure. "We're here regarding inheritance enforcement and property status." She pressed play on a small recorder. And there it was again, Lucas's voice, clipped and final. "This is not your home. Get out." Then the sharp, flat sound that I still felt under my skin. No one spoke. The silence was different this time, not denial, but recognition. Amber's hands twisted in her lap. Lucas stared at the table's wood grain as if it could open and swallow him whole. Ms. Dunn's tone never changed. Clause 178 has been validated. Under its terms, Mr. Lucas Henderson forfeits all inheritance rights. Ownership reverts fully to Mrs. Mary Henderson. Additionally, due to the recorded evidence of physical harm, a restraining order is in effect for 1 year. Amber tried first. "Mary, we were overwhelmed. You know grief, it." "Stop," Ms. Dunn said evenly. "This is not negotiation. This is notification." Lucas finally looked up. "You can't just erase me," he said. "I didn't," I replied. "You did that yourself." He stood then, pacing once, then twice. The old habit of jaw-clenching he'd had since childhood surfaced. "We can fix this," he muttered. "We'll repay everything." "The bank will take repayment," I said. "But not apology." He opened his mouth again, then closed it. The silence in that room was thick as snowfall. When it was over, they left quickly, papers in hand, the sound of shoes too loud in the hallway. Through the window, I watched them cross the parking lot. Amber was speaking fast, gesturing with her phone. Lucas walked ahead, shoulders rigid. I did not follow them with my eyes when they drove away. 2 weeks later, the house stood empty. Their things were gone, the curtains drawn. A neighbor, Mrs. Evans, called to say a moving truck had come early morning, quiet as thieves. I drove past once slowly. The lawn was uncut and the welcome mat was gone. But the mailbox still bore my name, faded, but there. M. Henderson. I did not stop. Ms. Dunn managed the sale. It went to a nonprofit foundation that helped displaced senior women. The board director sent me a note in looping handwriting. "Your house will shelter those who lost theirs. You have turned pain into place." I pinned the note above my desk. Meanwhile, Lucas tried calling twice more, then stopped. The last text I ever received from him read, "We didn't mean to hurt you. We just thought it was time to move forward." I never replied. There is a point beyond which words only reopen old fractures. I heard through Carol that they moved to Idaho, renting a townhouse smaller than my old guest room. I wished them stability, though not contact. Some lessons require silence to echo properly. Each week I met Ms. Dunn once more to finalize the paperwork. "You've handled this with remarkable restraint," she said one morning. "I learned restraint from 30 years in the ward," I answered. "You can't raise your voice while holding a needle." She smiled. "And what will you do now, Mary?" I thought about it for a long moment. Begin again. But smaller. Cleaner. When the sale closed, the wire hit my account, $214,000 after fees. I didn't feel triumph. Only closure, round and quiet. I mailed Lucas a single envelope through Ms. Dunn's office. Inside was a photocopy of the mortgage's final balance, stamped paid in full, and beneath it, a note in my handwriting. "Family is not ownership. You can build your own house now. Just remember whose hands built the first one." No return address. That night, I brewed tea in my blue mug and watched snow gather on the railing outside my apartment. Each flake landed without sound, and I understood that peace is not something you win, it's something you protect once you stop explaining yourself to those who never listened. I didn't move back. I drove west toward Missoula, following the river like thread through trees, to a lakeside cabin, 1 room, pine boards, a porch deep enough for rain. The first night, I left the window open and the water kept time. I unpacked deliberately. The blue mug on a hook by the sink. The green binder in the bottom drawer, not as weight but as record complete. David's scarf over a chair, faintly cedar. A small lamp on the table and a bowl of keys. Car, cabin, post office, the ring lighter by 2. Routines returned, smaller and kinder. I swept the porch, fed the juncos, wrote the date at the top of a fresh notebook. I learned the weather by the sound of the lake. Bright days hissed, cloudy ones breathed. The grocer knew my name by week 2. "You settling in, Mary?" he asked. "I am," I said. "I found a seniors center that runs a warm line for displaced women. On Wednesdays, I brewed coffee and listened. I didn't tell my story. I kept the focus on theirs. I believe you, I'd say, because sometimes that sentence is a life raft. At the food pantry, I sorted cans, labels forward, and showed a volunteer how to stack boxes so the seams faced one direction. Order makes the world easier to carry. I allowed small pleasures that cost less than regret: a library card, a pot of lavender, a radio that caught late-night classical from the university. I walked the shoreline after supper and memorized the silhouettes of 3 pines to guide me if fog rolled in. I started a file marked future and slid in concert flyers, a bus schedule, and a crayon drawing from a neighbor's child who liked my red gloves. Some evenings I missed the old hallway, the dent where David's tool belt brushed, the creak on the 3rd stair. Grief still visits, but it knocks now, it doesn't barge. I make tea, open the window, and let it sit until the kettle clicks cool. Lucas and Amber grew quieter in my mind. Not forgiven, not pursued. Finished. When memory tries to argue, I open the binder to clause 178 and close it again. Boundaries aren't walls, they're doors you choose not to unlock. By autumn, the cabin smelled like pine and bread. I hosted 2 neighbors for soup. We ate on the porch while rain stitched the lake. June, 3 doors down, told me about trout that leap at dusk. They always return to the surface, she said. We waited. 3 silvers broke the skin, bright and brief. At night, I keep a candle by the window, the same brand I used in the old kitchen. The flame makes the glass breathe. I write 1 true thing each day. Today I repaired the hinge. Today I laughed once. Today I did not explain myself to anyone. That is the balance I earned, not revenge, not triumph. Just a life measured in work I choose, doors I open, peace I refuse to apologize for. The house I lost shelters women like me. The home I have is a room where the floor does not tilt, where the lock answers to my hand, where silence is not punishment but rest. I am home. I didn't lose a home, I reclaimed my dignity. The walls and floors I built now shelter others who know what it means to be locked out by those they loved. Sometimes I drive past Helena just to see the mountains, but I never turn down the old road. The past doesn't need witnesses, it needs rest. Each morning I open my cabin door, breathe the pine air, and feel no permission required. I think of Lucas sometimes not in anger, but in understanding. We are each responsible for the doors we close. Silence is not weakness. Silence is preparation. It's the space where strength gathers its breath. I found mine between paperwork and quiet mornings, between grief and resolve. If this touched a nerve, you belong here. Subscribe to hear truths where silence becomes strength. Because sometimes the loudest act of courage is simply choosing peace, locking the door, and never asking for the key again.